Welcome back, Leominsterites, to another episode of Representing Leominster. I'm your state representative, Natalie Higgins, and I'm thrilled to be joined with Governor's Councilor Paul Depalo. But just before we get to the Governor's Councilor, because we're shooting this on February 26th, I just want to give an update related to the Leominster flood FEMA disaster declaration. For those of you who have been following this, you may have learned that recently FEMA declined to declare the September 11th flood a disaster at the federal level. And there's an effort underway to try to appeal this. We're really grateful for Governor Healy and her immediate announcement that she was going to appeal this decision. And I have an update from the mayor's office of information that they're looking for. So if you know anyone that has this particular kind of damage, this is going to be really helpful in the appeal. They're looking for additional information from homeowners that had major damage defined as a water line above 18 inches or the electrical outlets in any essential living space. That's a room within a home that serves the function of a bedroom, a bathroom, a kitchen, or a living room that's regularly occupied or used by one or more members of the household and requires repair to bring functionality back to the home. Or a water line on the first floor of a residence when the basement was completely full. So if you know anyone who has this particular damage to their home and they haven't been in touch with the mayor's office, they should reach out. They can also send email to flood@leominster-mass.gov. Governor's Councilor, thank you for taking some time for us to do a little update on the flood situation. Thank you for being here in our next episode. And many folks might not know what a governor's councilor is, so could we kick off with kind of what your role is and for refreshing people's memories who might not be familiar that we elect governor's councilors every 2 years? Every 2 years,
that's a good idea. But first, let me thank you, Representative, for having me here and for the work you've been doing for the people of Leominster around the flooding and the people who are still dealing with that. I know how hard you've been working with the delegation.
And you've seen it kind of across your district because it also hit Leicester is another place that was impacted by this particular flood.
Yeah, that's right. So that's a great segue. So Governor's Council is an 8-member body. So we're district-based, which means I represent 1/8 of the state. We are in District 7 here in Leominster, which is essentially all of Central Mass from the Quabbin Reservoir to 495. So it's 61 cities and towns. And we had the very important job of approving our state judges and parole board members, as well as any pardons or commutations that the governor issues, and some administrative duties as well. But the main function, the function that people pay the most attention to, is approving our judges.
Yeah. And I have to say, I'm super impressed that you have been so excited about taking on this role because it's one that we don't hear a lot about, and you've been really visible across Central Mass, really educating folks about why judges matter and why this position really matters. And someone who went to law school, right, like we don't always remember the way that judges become judges and how important it is to make sure that they have diverse experiences that reflect our lived lives to make sure that they're making decisions that really reflect our community.
Yeah, there's so much that goes into thinking about appointing a judge. In Massachusetts, there is mandatory retirement at age 70, so it's not necessarily a lifetime appointment. Nonetheless, you hit on a good point that we want to make sure judges are representative of our communities, and importantly that they know our communities as well. So that means a lot of different things. I talk a lot about regional equity in my role because it's important that when a seat opens up in, let's say, Fitchburg District Court or Worcester District Court, it's important that we have folks come into those roles who already know our communities, who know the resources available, and who know the team that's already on the ground working to make our courts function and to make sure our justice system is delivering for the people of Massachusetts.
Have you been really excited about any recent appointments? Are there ones that have come from Central Mass that you're just like, this is great and this was really good for our community?
Yeah, absolutely. And this connects with what my real passion around the job is. But one appointment that happened just 2 weeks ago that I'm incredibly proud of is the culmination of 3.5 years of work from when I first ran for this office is we now have a full bench of judges in the Worcester Juvenile Court. So Worcester juvenile judges also sit in Fitchburg sometimes and some of the other district courts around Central Mass. But basically when I first ran for this office and I came from a background I'm also an attorney. We both went to Northeastern Law. I came from a background of also having been a special educator. So I'd worked with a lot of court-involved youth. And not by design. By design, I was working with kids who had social emotional disabilities. I was working with kids who were dealing with abuse, neglect, and trauma. And the unfortunate reality is there's a huge overlap between that population and the kids who wind up in juvenile court. Sometimes it's for something they did. Oftentimes it's for something that has nothing to do with them. It might be something their caregivers did. It might be a referral from the school. It could be a lot of different reasons. But Worcester Juvenile Court over the last 10 years has been the most overworked juvenile court in the Commonwealth. We have huge backlogs. We have a huge crush of care and protection cases. Those are really the kinds of heartbreaking cases where judges are deciding whether to keep a family together, whether a child is safe in their home. And so having those cases delayed is of massive concern to me, because every day that we let an at-risk child stay in an unsafe environment is a day where we're really exacerbating the potential negative outcomes. So a few years ago, there was work amongst the legislature to add a seat to the Worcester Juvenile Court. That was a long process that area legislators worked together on. And as I said, now we finally have it full. And I just couldn't be more excited. The new judge is named Jennifer Curry. She's very excited to be starting. From what I understand, she's rotating, as new judges do, around the state for a few weeks.
Great.
To get a feel for how things are done in other places so that no one place gets stagnant. And she'll be sitting in Worcester very soon. She might be there actually as of this week. I'm not positive.
Okay, cool.
But it's very, very, very exciting.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, when the new governor was elected, it was the first thing I brought up to her, to the lieutenant governor, to all of the people in the governor's legal office, and I couldn't be more grateful that she prioritized it. She really did. She recognized the need, and the Worcester Juvenile seat was one of the first several appointments she made. So it's great to have that partnership with the governor's office as well.
Yeah, and I know firsthand how critical the juvenile court is. When I was at Northeastern, one of my co-ops was with the juvenile court with the former Chief Justice Judge Erskine.
Yes.
So I got to do 3 months of really watching kind of all of the different ways that the juvenile court works and has challenges that we really need to think about in Worcester County. And now in the role as a legislator, we work with a lot of families that are involved with the juvenile court in a variety of ways and trying to help them navigate and understand what their rights are and how to best advocate for what their kids need and their families need.
Right. And as you know, investing at that early stage, I mean, the kids who are in juvenile court, if we can invest in them and help them stabilize their lives and help them get the resources to kind of pursue opportunity, it's going to pay off for all of us. The kids are going to have a better life. So many of these kids end up incarcerated or involved in the criminal system as adults because we just didn't catch them in time. So you're absolutely right. I mean, it's maybe the most important court to pay attention to as far as long-range consequences.
Yeah, right. Our legal system is supposed to be, our court system is supposed to be rehabilitative, and we don't always see it working that way, but the juvenile court is where that is front and center, and a really awesome opportunity where a little bit of resources and better connections with community resources can go a long way for a kid growing up facing just challenges that we all face. Yeah,
and it's, I mean, the evidence is crystal clear on that, and it's common sense as well, right? And what's uplifting as well is that there's a trend now where the district courts are starting to recognize emerging adults is the term they use, but those folks who are 18, 19, 20 years old, who, you know, who still are developing and still are growing, and you know, whose brains are still developing, and they're still developing their impulse control, and they're still developing the confidence to resist peer pressure. And so I'm really, I think it's great that our district courts are starting to treat that population, the 18, 19, 20-year-olds, with a little extra emphasis on rehabilitation, a little extra emphasis on diverting them out of the criminal system. And it's been great because, again, in my role as an educator, I studied quite a bit on brain development. And so I know that how you approach a child who's dealing with trauma is going to 100% impact the result, the reaction you get from that child.
Yeah, and we're seeing a lot more emphasis on that with kind of these specialty courts, right? We finally got a veterans court in Worcester County, which is shocking to me that it had taken this long to finally get it on board. But we're also seeing it with drug treatment courts. And how can we actually connect folks with services where there's a much more effective and cost-effective way to help folks deal with the challenges they're facing rather than a carceral system. Yeah,
and that's why I say regional equity is so important from before, right? So if you have a judge coming to sit in Fitchburg District Court who knows Fitchburg, in Leominster District Court who knows Leominster, in Brookfield, and all of our district courts, when you know the resources in the community, you're better able to foresee the outcome of the sentencing or the probation conditions that you're delivering as a judge. So it just makes sense to have folks who know the community sitting on the bench.
So for folks who want to learn more about what a governor's counselor does, do you meet regularly? Can they tune into that? Like, how can folks learn more about the work that you're doing?
Sure. So we hold formal assemblies typically every Wednesday. The assemblies are where we vote on pending nominations. And as nominations come forward, we hold hearings for those nominees, much like folks are probably familiar with the way the United States Senate handles Supreme Court nominees, where there's a public hearing. We don't have all the drama of those hearings, but we do conduct those public hearings that can be viewed on YouTube. And we typically leave at least a week, sometimes 2 weeks in between the formal hearing and the vote, so that if there is more public input that needs to be listened to, that we're able to take that in.
Awesome.
So if you want, I can walk you through the process of what happens when a nomination happens and what my job is. So the way I approach the role is I want to be proactive because I want the governor to have a large slate of qualified Central Mass people available when positions come forward. So I spend a lot of time recruiting, meeting with attorneys, meeting with folks in the legal community across Central Mass and really across the state, and trying to identify folks who I think should consider applying. When folks do apply, who I feel really strongly about, I'm in there advocating through their application process, which happens within the governor's office. Ultimately, when a nomination is put forward, typically I'll meet with the nominee for an hour or so to get a feel for them beyond their resume. And then it depends. If there's concerns, then obviously they end up being addressed. There's lots of phone calls to past coworkers, attorneys who've practiced against that person, so on and so forth. So the work is really all behind the scenes. We end up having a hearing where I try to take that time to be asking questions that I think the public will want to see a public record of. Oftentimes the hearing is not as extensive as the conversations we've had behind the scenes, and that's a function of time, really. So we land at the voting stage and things move forward. So with this governor, it's been tremendous in her first year to have a collaborative relationship where her team is really listening to the needs of Central Mass. As I said, the Worcester Juvenile Court being filled and other positions coming up, it's really it's gratifying to work with an administration that takes the job seriously and that takes regional equity seriously as well.
Awesome. And I think it's important to bring up, we're always fighting for more regional equity across Worcester County to get more folks appointed to boards and commissions. There's lots of other ways at the state level that you can serve. And I joke that state representatives are kind of like jack of all trades, master of very few. And so many of our residents are like really, really good experts in so many places that I just don't really have a full grasp of what their background is. But letting me know that you care about that and that you want to maybe serve the community either at a local level or state level. The governor is always looking for new nominations for boards and commissions too, and they're really trying to get more folks from Central and Western Mass to participate. And some of the ways that technology has allowed more hybrid style meetings has made it easier for folks from Worcester County to participate in those roles than it might have been hard to get into a Boston for a meeting, depending on your work schedule. So please be sure to be reaching out to us if you think that you're a lawyer in the area and you're really interested in learning more about what Councilor Depalo is talking about, but also if you're just a citizen that is really deeply concerned about something impacting our Commonwealth, there's probably a board or a commission addressing that issue across the Commonwealth.
That's such a great point, because you're absolutely right. There's a long list of vacancies a lot of room for good work for people who have passion in those particular areas. And I'm sure folks would reach out to you, but they're welcome to reach out to me as well, because we deal with some of the boards. We deal with the Boards and Commissions office. But I know in my hometown of Worcester, we always have boards and commission positions within the city that are available. And so oftentimes people don't even know about them. So yeah, it's obviously great to get involved in our local government.
Something we usually ask our guests are kind of like, what are your advocacy tips? If someone really wants to get a little more involved in their community and they have an issue that they care about, do you have any ideas on how folks can be stronger advocates, who they should be connecting with, how they should be lifting up their voice?
Maybe this is further bigger picture than you're asking, but showing up is life is all about showing up. You know, for me, my pathway to get involved with government was through actually boards and commissions in the city of Worcester. I was on the, there was a need for a planning board member, and so I joined the planning board. In Worcester, it's appointed. And that was just a great entree for me into how the city government functions. And can
you talk a little bit about what a planning board member does in case folks aren't familiar?
Absolutely. I loved being on the planning board. So the planning board essentially reviews site plans for new developments in the city, and has some discretion in seeking plans that will accommodate the needs of the city and the desires of the city, and also interprets the city's zoning laws to make sure that projects are adherent to those as well. So in my time in Worcester, on the planning board, you'd see everything from someone with a large lot who wants to subdivide their lot and build a home on the side of their existing home, to I was there when Worcester was redeveloping a very large swath of land that is now Polar Park and the Canal District. So that was actually really exciting to see the way that strategically the city was having to rezone different parts of land to accommodate the new development. It gave me a lot of insight into seeing, I'm not involved in city government, but it gave me a lot of insight into the ways that in my city of Worcester, we need to modernize our zoning. And I know that with there's a lot of discussion around the rest of the state around the MBTA communities, and the way that some communities are struggling with how to restructure or revision their zoning to accommodate all sorts of pressures that are coming. But to me, land use is, I mean, it defines our city. So it was really fascinating for me to be a part of that. But there's so many opportunities, the Zoning Board of Appeals and the Health Commission, and there's just so many areas where people in our community, like you said, with all their expertise, there's a need for people to step up. So.
Yeah, and I want to emphasize these are often appointed positions, so you don't have to necessarily run for office and go through all of the work to run to be elected to a seat. These are actually ways where you can bring your resume and show like you are really qualified to have this role. And the person making that decision, whether it's the mayor or the governor, can put your name forward.
And what I've found, I don't know if you agree with this, but it's not an intimidating process to do this. Like you said, just hand them your resume and have a conversation, and it's not as if it's not as if it's a stressful experience.
Yeah, and the cool part about the state level piece is they'll keep your resume on file for the folks that we've worked with, and they'll pitch you like, hey, we think you might be a good candidate for this, and if you think like, no, I'm not really into that, you can keep your resume on file for future consideration for other roles, because there are a lot of intersections of people's experiences that could be really pivotal.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you want us to be thinking of when we're thinking about our courts and the role of the Governor's Council, as we have a little bit of time left? Yeah,
I'll bring up something we haven't discussed too much, and that is the parole board. So everyone can wrap their head around what a judge is, essentially, right? Parole board is a little more in the weeds depending on how well you know the criminal system. But when someone is on parole, they're re-entering our community from our incarceration facilities, right? So the parole board's job is to hold hearings for folks and determine whether or not they're ready to rejoin the community, and B, what resources will this person need to have on the ground so that it's a successful reentry, so that they don't end up right back in jail, right? We want to reduce recidivism. We want to get people on their feet and get them back in into our families and our neighborhoods and our communities. So I've worked for the last 3 years also on that area, specifically in trying to get parole board members who have social work backgrounds. And the reason is that a social worker is familiar with all the state agencies that are there delivering resources. A social worker knows the rehabilitation facilities and the substance abuse treatment facilities. And so adding that perspective to the parole board, which has traditionally been mostly attorneys, I think is a huge difference maker, because really at the end of the day, we spend so much money in our criminal system punishing people. And oftentimes consequences are warranted. However, if we're spending all that money, we want to know we're getting good return. So good return to me looks like A, public safety, and B, making sure people don't return once they leave. So by getting people the resources they need when they're re-entering our community, A, we are protecting public safety because we're making sure they don't lapse, and B, we're potentially saving a life, and at the very least, we're getting a life on track. So it's things like that around the margins that for me make it such an honor to be on this council, because I'm able to work on small issues that maybe people don't see, and maybe it's only directly impacting a small population, but the ripples of those actions kind of spread out into the community. I'm sure that's probably how you feel about your work as representative as well. But
yeah, and it's one of the really important places that we worked on with the big criminal justice reform package when I was a new state rep, was really trying to figure out how do we do diversion on the front end for first-time offenders, and how do we reduce recidivism on the back end. And it's easier said than done, but making sure that we have these warm handoffs and support so folks can find a safe place to live, get a job, right? Like all of these things, stay connected with their family while they're incarcerated, right? Because those family connections are really important to have a community that you're returning to. And we want to make sure that we're doing this successfully, and we're helping folks transition as quickly as possible back into their home community.
Right. We all win, and it's working. We know it's working. We see the programs where the success rates are through the roof. We see that overall incarceration rates are down, and so it works. But it's taken a lot of people a lot of time to make this progress.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to be on. If folks want to get in touch with you, what's the easiest way to get in touch with you? And we can make sure that we put it on the screen too.
Sure. Well, you can find me on the interweb at pauldepalo.com. But you can also find my contact information on the state website for the Governor's Council. And I'd be happy to talk with you, and anything I can do to help constituents, I'm more than happy to work on.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to tell us a little bit more about what the Governor's Council does. It's one of those lesser known but incredibly important positions in our government, and you're making these really big decisions that are going to impact our families kind of like each and every day. So thank you for your service to our community, and thank you for taking some time to be with us. Yeah, thank you for shining light on Governor's Council, and thanks for your service too, Rob. Yeah. Thanks. So thank you all for tuning in. Next month, we're going to be joined by Senator John Cronin. Thanks so much, and have a great rest of your month.